Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler. I'm your host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. Today, we're going to talk about the concept of vulnerability because this is a word that gets tossed around a lot. And just like any word that is adopted by marketing, it gets bastardized and misused and often becomes misunderstood. So we're going to talk about what vulnerability actually is, why it can be useful, when it's not useful, some common rebuttals against why we all should be vulnerable, which I don't believe in. And then we're going to talk about a few steps that you can employ to make sure that your vulnerability isn't wasted, because too often it is by men who think that just being vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable is what they should do. And clearly that's not the case. And I'm going to make that case today. Before we do, just want to let you know that this is a podcast dedicated to helping men become better, more effective, more efficient, more profitable, more fulfilled fathers, husbands, business owners, community leaders, just men in general. So you're in the right place. So guys, let's get into this. You hear it a lot. You know, we've got to be vulnerable. I hear that. Authentic is one that I hear a lot. I heard a great way to look at vulnerability, to not reframe it, but a better understanding of what most people think vulnerability is, from my good friend Jack Donovan, who actually just says what we often attribute as being vulnerable is just humility. So I want to make sure that we're not misconstruing the terms and we're not using those terms interchangeably. Vulnerability, by definition, is exposing or bringing to light a weakness. If you think about it in the context of military strategy, we have generals and military strategists who will actually look at weaknesses, flaws, points of weaknesses in their battle plan. And the reason they do that is so they can expose those weaknesses and then shore those weaknesses up. But the exercise is not one of just let's figure out all the places that we're weak and then do nothing with it. You can see that I titled this Friday Field Notes, Vulnerability is Pointless Without This. Well, what is this? It's action. Action. The reason somebody in the military might want to take a good hard look at where they're strong and where they're weak or vulnerable is so they can actually do something about it. But guys, vulnerability for the sake of being vulnerable is not a practical exercise. It's not going to serve you. In fact, in many ways, it may undermine you. So we're not just out there to air our dirty laundry and just to be honest about these things. No, what is the point? And we always have to evaluate our motives for doing things. The reason that this has been so bastardized is because oftentimes we get awarded social media points and clout just for telling people how we have deficiencies and where we are weak. And as much as we enjoy the praise and accolades that come with positive reinforcement and encouragement, it really does nothing to move the needle unless you're willing and capable of making a difference in your life once you recognize a flaw or a vulnerability. Now, one thing I often hear from people when I talk about this, and we're going to get into these steps, is that people like to say that being vulnerable, just it opens up trust. And I actually don't agree with that. I don't think it establishes trust. I think, if anything, it has the great potential to erode trust. Because what happens if you tell people about your flaws? Maybe it's an addiction or an anger issue or a patience issue or an integrity issue. And you tell people about this without a clear action strategy and without clear steps in place to improve yourself, your weakness, you're actually teeing yourself up for eroded trust relative to what you had before. So vulnerability might open up the pathway to build trust, but you actually have to do something about it and prove that when you see something wrong in your own life, you're actually willing to do something about it. But make no mistake, it's not the vulnerability that builds trust. It's the action that you take afterwards that has the potential to garner trust and influence and credibility with other people. Now, I mentioned that another term, the term that I actually like to use for the way many people use vulnerability, is just being humble, acknowledging that you don't have it all figured out, acknowledging that you aren't as good as you think you are, acknowledging where you're weak and where you struggle, And when we're humble, what do? We give ourselves the opportunity to do something about it. And that's what it's all about. So let's break this down. I think first and foremost, when it comes to quote unquote being vulnerable, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not just shouting it from the rooftops because that's what we've been told we should do. You really, really should evaluate two things. Number one, who are you telling? Are the people that you're telling on your team, do they support you? Do they love you? Do they want you to win? Do they want you to thrive? Do they want you to succeed? Are they accountability partners? Are they willing to hold your feet to the fire? Are they willing to help you on your quest to shore up those weaknesses? Or are they random strangers who don't care about you, who don't like you, who would like to see you fail? An example of that might be a colleague or a coworker. If you explain all the places you're weak to this colleague or coworker, that individual, just like a battlefield enemy, might work to exploit your vulnerability. So we have to be cautious when we take on these broad, overarching concepts and applying them to every facet of our life. There might be a time where being vulnerable, not only is it not appropriate, it's actually dangerous for you to do so. I think about being out in public. I don't want to be vulnerable out in public. Now, in many ways, I am. Maybe I don't have my firearm on me that day. Maybe my head's not with me that day, and I'm off in la la land, being distracted with things, and my mindset's not right. That's a vulnerability. I don't want to expose myself that way. I want to make myself in public a difficult target to deal with. So much so that somebody says, I'm not going to mess with that guy. I'll go to the other guy who's a weenie, a weakling, and looks like he's distracted. So there's times in your life where being vulnerable is not a good thing. And I think it's really, really important that we evaluate that. You also have to consider why you're telling people. Why is it that you're telling people that you have an addiction? Why is it that you're telling people that you struggle with pornography, for example? Why is it that you're telling people that you have some sort of deficit? A lot of the times, I think it's so we can get some victim points. We can get some attaboys and praises and pats on the back. And again, as good as that sounds, that's not going to help you. It's not going to help you for somebody to pat you on the back and say, good little boy, you're doing a good job, when you're not. If, on the other hand, you're being vulnerable because you have told the right people and you know that those individuals will hold you accountable, or maybe you have a responsibility to shore some of these areas up. For example, I think it makes sense to talk about your weaknesses and your deficiencies with your wife and your children. Why? Because they are impacted by the decisions that you're making. But again, if you're just talking about all of the baggage and all of the problems, but don't really have a clear cut plan for improvement, it's not going to build trust. It's going to erode it. So that's very important. Number one, again, is who you're telling. And number two, why you're telling them. Are your motives one that are going to drive and move the needle forward? Or are you just trying to get some superficial pats on the back? Something to consider. So with that said, I think I've got, let's see here, six tips that are going to help you utilize vulnerability in an effective way. Not this modern notion or concept of just exposing all of your issues and airing out your dirty laundry for the sake of doing it, but actually for the real reason, the effective reason, which is to make yourself stronger. Number one is you have to be objective in identifying your weaknesses. All right. I don't care how good you think you are. If you find yourself saying or feeling like, hey, I'm really good at this. Hey, I've got this all figured out. I'm wonderful. I'm God's gift to whatever, women, business, health, whatever. If you feel yourself saying those things and feeling that way, you're about to find out that you're going to be in a world of hurt because you're arrogant and you're full of yourself and you're not willing to take a good long look at where you are weak. Okay. And it's going to come kick you in the pants. Those weaknesses, they will be exploited. They will be uncovered. They will be found out and they will be used against you. So you can play defense and hope that when that weakness comes to light, that you can figure it out, or you can play offense and deal with it accordingly now so that you never have to deal with it in a negative way down the road. So identify your weaknesses, write down the things that you're good at. I think that's an important exercise. And also take that journal out and write down the things where you feel like you need improvement. my own personal life, one thing that I can improve on, and I have, is my sobriety. I've had my struggles with alcohol over the past several years. I've been sober now for 6 months. That's something that I feel like I have a good handle on, but I'm not going to be so arrogant to say that it isn't a temptation at times. I need to have a realistic expectation of the threats against me and my well-being. So that's something I deal with. I deal with patience issues. I deal with anger issues. Now, again, to go back to why I'm telling you this, because my motive is not just to air my dirty laundry, but my motive in this instance is to serve you, is to help you, is to show you that I don't have it all figured out and I'm actively working on improving myself. And I think that's a pure motive. So continue to analyze yourself and really figure out what your weaknesses are and be honest. This isn't a graded test. This isn't something you're going to turn into me or anybody else, but go ahead and jot those things down so you can start to do something about it. Number 2 is I changed the order of these a little bit here. Let's see where I want to go here. So if number 1's identifying your weaknesses, then number 2 is you have to get to the root of the issue. Okay, if you have an addiction issue, for example, it's not the substance abuse. It's what's underneath the substance abuse. It's what's driven you to alcoholism or gambling or pornography or womanizing or your vice of choice. What is it that's driving you to that? If it's womanizing, for example, is what's driving you to that the need and acceptance of women? Okay, well, that's the issue. We need to address the issue. And I look at it a little bit like math. I'm working with my son a little bit as I see his math problems. And to be fair, my wife does most of the homeschooling, but every once in a while I step in because I'm fairly decent at math and we're working on fractions. And in fractions, we understand the lowest common denominator. We have to get to the lowest common denominator in order to combine fractions, right? So if we're talking about vulnerability, when you get to the root issue, which is the lowest common denominator, what happens is that you start shoring up other areas of your life that you didn't even know were an issue. So for example, if I'm dealing with alcoholism and I'm trying to escape some emotional trauma or baggage from the past or fear of rejection or abandonment, sure, I could do all the things. I could put all the systems in place to deal with alcoholism and not have it in my house and make it harder and have accountability partners. I should do that. But at the root of what I should be doing is really figuring out why I feel abandoned, why I feel rejected, why I need to escape and get out of my own head at times. And if I do that, not only do I begin to cure the alcoholism, but I also begin to cure other problems that I maybe didn't even know existed. Problems in relationships, problem with performance at work, problems with overeating, problems with things that don't really appear to be an issue until you address them. So the beauty of actually getting to the root of the issue and vulnerability and figuring it out is that you're going to address all sorts of issues that you didn't even know you had. It's kind of like somebody who's severely obese and they are pre-diabetic, let's say. Well, if they start and get in shape, they start to address their body mass and their fat percentage. And what happens? Well, they sleep better. Their libido increases, the sex improves, the relationship with their spouse improves. There's so many other benefits that maybe they didn't even know were a problem, but because they addressed the root issue, which is obesity, then they're solving not only the problem they had, which is pre-diabetic, but everything else. I hope this makes sense. So we have to get to the root of the issue. And the best way to do that is to begin to journal and document when you're having temptations, when you're struggling, when you're feeling down, when you're dealing with these weaknesses. Just write those out. Hey, I'm dealing with this because last night this morning, my dog, I went to go to the gym and I came downstairs and my youngest son was on the couch watching some cartoons. And I saw a big pile of vomit on the couch and my son pointed to it and it was from one of our dogs. And I got very, very mad, like really mad. And I was so upset with the dog and I wanted to kick the dog. I didn't, but I wanted to. But as I was getting angry, I thought to myself, what? Okay. I mean, yes, nobody wants to clean up vomit the first thing in the morning, but why are you so upset? Why is this so upsetting to you? And you know what? It was because I was running late. I didn't wake up on the right time. I kind of dinked around getting out of bed. I didn't kind of wandered around and did a few things before I went into the gym. And I knew that I was really busy today and had a lot to get done, but I didn't plan my time accordingly. And this was just one more effing thing that I needed to do that I didn't want to do. The vomit wasn't the problem. You know what the problem was? Me not managing my schedule and time right. Because if I had, when my alarm went off, I would have got right up. All of my clothes would have been laid out, which they weren't. I would have been ready to go. I would have been on time. And, you know, it would have sidetracked me, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. So the problem wasn't the dog vomit. The problem was something deeper. And until I started thinking about what that deeper issue was and started to analyze, I really wasn't able to get to the root of it as to why I'm angry. So that's number one, number two is get to the root of the issue. Number three is you have to have an emotionally charged reason for improvement, right? If you're an alcoholic or you have patience issues or anger issues or obesity issues, relational issues, whatever your problem is, you really have to get an emotionally charged reason for improvement. Because until the pain of staying where you are is greater than the discomfort of improvement, you're going to stay right where you are. It is amazing to me how often I will do things that I know are not in my best interest. I know objectively 100% certain things are not in my best interest, and yet I'm so tempted to do those things. Why? Because I'm getting something out of it. There's some perceived benefit. If there wasn't a perceived benefit, you wouldn't do it. So until the pain of the current behavior is greater than the discomfort of change, you're going to stay right where you are. So how do you lessen the fear or the danger, or I should say, how do you reduce the uncertainty and the discomfort of change? Excuse me. The best way to do that, to tip the scales, if you will, is to have a very emotionally charged reason for doing so. If you're fat, for example, you're probably going to stay that way until you realize, or at least visualize yourself on your deathbed at 45 years old, looking into your children's eyes, wishing and praying to God that you had a few more days or weeks or hours with them. Okay, now this is starting to get emotionally charged. If we're talking about womanizing, maybe you stepped out on your wife. Until you look in your wife's eyes and you realize what maybe it did to her and the struggles that has on her, and that you actually want to be with her forever, then you're probably not going to change. If you're getting passed over for promotions, until you realize and come to terms with the fact that if you are promoted, you are going to be able to impact lives. You're going to be able to improve your financial situation, which gives you opportunities for vacations and experiences with your family. Or a negative emotional exercise is consider being in the same position that you are forever. And how will that make you feel? It'll make you feel weak and pathetic and inferior. And you don't want to feel that way. I know men aren't supposed to experience emotions, and I have people message me all the time, and I can't believe you're emotional. Excuse me. Last week on the Ask Me Anything, I said that I was feeling off today. I said something like that when I started. And I had somebody comment, oh, well, you know, from the minute that you started this conversation, I didn't even listen because no man is emotional. Okay, that's cute, but it isn't true. Okay, all of us are emotional creatures. So rather than hiding that fact or suppressing it, why not just use it as extra fuel? Get emotional. When I look at my vision, it's emotional. When I make a podcast or a post on social media, you know how I know the ones that are going to do well, the ones that are really going to resonate with you, that are really going to serve you? It's the ones where I read it and I'm almost emotionally, like physically emotional when I do the podcast or when I write that post. That's how I know this is the one that's going to resonate, because we all resonate with the feeling of certain phrases, certain videos, certain conversations, certain words. So let's get emotionally charged on that. And if you haven't done the vision exercise, I would encourage you to go pick up our battle planner. We actually talk about doing vision in length, and you can do that at store.orderaman.com. Oh, and by the way, we have a 50% off discount right now through the month of February on everything store-wide. And you just use the code 5050 at checkout. That was a pretty good segue into the store. I got to be honest. I'll take some credit for that one. Number 4. Once you begin to identify weaknesses and flaws and vulnerabilities, I think it makes sense to talk with people who have gone through the same issues that you are, because we have unrealistic expectations of what it's going to take in order to get there. If you're overweight, you're probably going to have an unrealistic expectation about what it's going to take to improve your health and how fast you'll lose weight and how fast you'll build muscle and how fast you'll be feeling better. We tend to project that things are going to go better and smoother than they actually do. So I think it's very important that we have realistic expectations about what it takes. If we go back to our military analogy, when there is a vulnerability that's recognized, a weakness, then we bring in counselors, we bring in strategists, we bring in people who are experts in the field, and we say, hey, here's this vulnerability. What do we need to do to shore this up? And through their years and years of experience and seeing and interacting with these situations, they give us feedback, and then we employ those strategies, and then hopefully it all works out. But it does make sense for you to talk with somebody who either has overcome these issues themselves or has a track record of helping people overcome these issues. It might be a therapist, it might be a friend, it might be some sort of group specific to the issue that you're dealing with, but you do need to work with people who are in the process of and have overcome the same challenges as you. Now, one thing I often hear is that you shouldn't, and I've said it, but I want to add some context, is that you shouldn't take advice from broke people, or you shouldn't take fitness advice from unhealthy people, or you shouldn't take marriage advice from people who have gone through divorces. I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Now, look, if we're talking about finances, for example, I'm not going to take financial advice from somebody who is broke and currently broke and has always been broke. But I will take advice from somebody who was broke and then pulled themselves out of poverty and now is independently wealthy. If we're talking about fitness, I'm not going to take fitness advice from somebody who's 50, 60, 70, 100 pounds overweight. But I will take advice from somebody who was 100 pounds overweight and has lost 100 pounds over the last year to 2 years. If we're talking about relational advice, I'm not going to take advice from a man who is has gone through 2 or 3 divorces and doesn't appreciate or like women. But I will take marriage advice from somebody who has been divorced and is now working on rebuilding that marriage, or in a new marriage that they're working to make better than the previous one. It's the fact that they overcame the challenging issue and they've learned and grown from it that gives me confidence in their ability to help me on my path. In fact, I think that person's more qualified than somebody who's never gone through any health challenges, never gone through any financial challenges, or never gone through any relational challenges. But regardless, make sure that you talk with others who have overcome the same thing that you do. Number 5 is we now need to build in systems and support. Systems and support. You need to have systems in place to ensure that you're fixing the vulnerability. If it's alcoholism, what are your systems? Well, it could be no alcohol in the house. Don't go to the store that you usually go to buy booze. Don't go out with the friends that you normally get drunk with. Don't go to the bars that you like to go to when you were living a different life and your friends invite them somewhere else. Like, get yourself out of those environments and situations. Guys, this doesn't make you weak. There's a lot of men out there who believe that it makes you weak to have systems in place. Like, you should just toughen it up and just will your desires into existence. That sounds really great, but it doesn't work because we know willpower is fleeting. So why wouldn't we put systems in place to ensure that we're not just relying on willpower, and instead now we're relying on the systems to make sure that we stay on track? It doesn't make you weak to do that. It makes you a better man to do that. And if you want specifics on how to create systems that will help you, go back and listen to the Friday Field Notes. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And I talked about, the title is Discipline is Overrated. And I talked about the 3-part framework. You need motivation, inspiration, using those terms interchangeably. You need discipline. And the third tier, the third component of this is systems and processes. So I break that down pretty well. And then support. You've got to have other men in your corner. This is something that I see pop up more and more, that men need to have other men in their corner, but it's still something that I think is underutilized. Men in your corner is a powerful tool, and they can become powerful allies on your quest to improve. Don't do it alone. Okay. You're not a tough guy. You're not a cool guy. You're not an alpha or an omega or a sigma or any of these Greek alphabet titles that I hear. You're not that. And I'm not that. I need other guys in my corner. In fact, I sent a message to some guys that I've got a contest with right now. So it's Rick, Wayne, Sam, Matt, or somebody, Chris. Those are the guys that are in this contest, this weight loss contest. And we're all holding each other accountable. We're all busting each other's chops and, supporting each other and sending pictures of us working out. And, I don't think I would have been able to get in as good a shape as I am over the last 2, 3, 4 months if it weren't for the support from these guys. So if you don't have that, you need to work on building that. And how do you build it? I think that conversation is better for another episode. And I'll talk about becoming a high value man, so you can attract not only high value women, or if you're married, to improve and help her on her own path to becoming a high value woman, but how you can attract high value men as your brothers, as confidants, as men that you want in your corner. Number 6 is, let me look here. Yes. So this is the last one here. You have to have a recovery strategy. All right. We talked a little bit about this in systems and support, but now you have to have a system or a strategy in place when you screw up. Okay. If you notice a vulnerability, odds are that it's because of patterns, rituals, routines, things that you've done over the course of a year, 5 years, 10 years, and that has created the circumstances that you're in right now. And it's going to be very, very difficult in a matter of 2 weeks or 3 weeks to break those systems, to break that wiring, to rewire through neuroplasticity in your brain, to rewire new paths and new ways of behaving. It takes time, and you're going to slip up. If you're on the road to alcoholism recovery, you might relapse. If you're trying to get in shape, you might miss a few days or decide that I'm going to eat that huge piece of cake and it gets the better of you. I'm on this journey, this fitness journey with my buddies right now. And the other night I went out to dinner with a friend and I was planning on getting, a steak and vegetables. Well, guess what? I got a pizza and I ate the whole thing, the entire pizza, except for the olives. I don't like olives. So I ate the whole thing other than those olives. Okay, that was a screw up. Now, does it mean that I just throw in the towel and I give everything up and I stop and I'm not in the contest anymore? No, it just means that I got to get back on the path, drink water, go exercise, eat right, and make amends for my screw up. You're going to slip. And if you don't acknowledge that and you don't recognize that and you don't develop a strategy in place right now for your slip ups, then those slip ups could permanently derail you on a long-term basis. But if instead you have a system in place, hey, if I screw up, this is what I do to recover. I think A, you're less likely to screw up because you're aware of it. And B, when you do screw up, you're going to recover faster than had you not had a plan in order to fix your screw ups and your mess ups and you regressing and going back to what you were doing before. So that's the strategy, guys. Remember, vulnerability is pointless without this one thing, and that one thing is action. But it's not just flailing your arms around and flopping around. It's actually being intentional with your actions. So number 1, identifying weaknesses. Number 2, getting to the root of the issue. The weakness is not usually the problem. There's something underneath. Number 3, having emotionally charged reasons for improvement. Number 4, talking with others who have overcome that same vulnerability that you have. Number 5, creating systems and support. And then number 6, having that recovery strategy in case you slip up. This is the way, guys. This is the path. Let's get over this whole modern notion of vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability. And let's be aware that when we receive praise and accolades, we think we're doing something good. I wish I could cite the source, but I saw this study one time that individuals who talk about what they're going to do often receive the praise of other people. And it's the same sense of feeling that individuals get once they complete the actual objective they said they were going to. So in a way, you're actually receiving the benefit, or at least one of the benefits of doing the work by just talking about it, not actually doing the work. So for example, and you've all seen this, you jump on social media and you decide on your Facebook post, you're going to write, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 months. And then you look at the comment, it's like, you're awesome. Way to go. That's amazing. You're incredible. I'm so proud of you. Hold up. You haven't even done anything yet. That's a trap. So we need to be really, really careful of not getting the benefit of doing something without actually doing the work. Guys, we have to do the work. We have to put forth the effort. Vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability is not enough. It just opens the doorway to build trust. And that only comes through you taking action towards shoring up your weaknesses. All right, I hope that serves you. Send me an email, send me a message, send me a text, a DM, whatever. Let me know what you thought of the show. Let me know how you're implementing this stuff in your life, how it's improving your life. I love to hear from you guys. Remember, I mentioned the store. It's store.orderaman.com. Everything in the store for the month of February is 50% off. We're just trying to clear out inventory and get rid of as much as we can. And it's not just stuff that doesn't sell. It's everything, including our battle planner. So if you go to the store, use the code STORE. It's store.orderaman.com and use the code 50 at checkout. All right, guys, we got work to do. Let's get after it. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.